Have you ever heard of the Black Panther Party? Maybe you've seen the iconic image of a Panther member in a black leather jacket and beret. But what do you really know about them? For many, the name conjures images of armed resistance. But their story is so much more complex and so much more important than that one image suggests. It's a story about community, survival, and a radical vision for a different America. Over the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into the real story of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, why they started, what they actually did, and the powerful legacy they left behind. Let's set the scene. It's the mid-1960s in Oakland, California. The civil rights movement, led by figures like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., had achieved monumental legal victories like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But for many black Americans, especially in urban centers outside the South, these laws didn't translate to immediate changes in their daily lives. They still faced systemic poverty, housing discrimination, underfunded schools, and critically aggressive and often brutal policing. The promises of the Great Society felt distant and hollow in the face of constant harassment and violence. It was out of this frustration, this gap between legal promise and lived reality, that the Black Panther Party was born. In October 1966, two community college students, Huey P. and Bobby Seale, decided they'd had enough. They weren't just activists, they were scholars of the struggle. They studied the works of Malcolm X, Frantz Fanon, and Mao Zedong. Blending black nationalism with anti-colonial thought, they saw the black community in Oakland as a colony within a nation, needing to develop its own power and institutions to survive. They drafted a 10-point program, a clear and direct list of demands. It wasn't just a protest document. It was a blueprint for a new society. It called for freedom, full employment, an end to economic exploitation, decent housing, education that taught black history, and an immediate end to police brutality. This document was the core of their ideology and the foundation for everything they would do. One of the most famous and most controversial aspects of the Panthers was their practice of patrolling the police. California law at the time allowed citizens to carry firearms openly as long as they were and pointed at anyone. Newton, who had studied the law extensively, armed the Panthers and had them follow police cars in their communities. When the police stopped a black citizen, the Panthers would stand at a legal distance, armed, and observe the interaction to ensure no rights were violated. They'd shout legal advice to the person being stopped. This was a radical act. It visually and powerfully challenged the state's monopoly on force and asserted the community's right to defend itself. It was an incredibly bold statement that brought them national attention, and it terrified the establishment. In fact, this practice directly led to the Mulford Act in California in 1967, a bill signed by then-Governor Ronald Reagan, which repealed the law allowing the public carrying of loaded firearms. The Panthers' armed protest against this bill at the state capitol in Sacramento is one of the most iconic images of the era. Focusing only on the guns misses the heart of the party. As Bobby Seale often said, the armed patrols were meant to protect the real work, their community's survival programs. These programs were the living embodiment of the 10-point program. The most famous was the Free Breakfast for School Children program. At its peak, it fed tens of thousands of kids every single day across the country, often providing the only nutritious meal they would get. The Panthers understood that a hungry child can't learn, and that building a revolution required a healthy, strong community. They organized these programs with incredible efficiency, securing donations from local merchants and mobilizing volunteers. They showed that they could provide for their communities when the government wouldn't, and it didn't stop with breakfast. The Panthers established dozens of other survival programs. They ran free health clinics, staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses, offering everything from basic checkups to sickle cell anemia testing, a disease that disproportionately affects black people and was largely ignored by the medical establishment at the time. They organized food pantries, clothing drives, and legal aid services. They even ran a safe seniors program where young people would escort elderly residents on their errands to protect them from muggings. These programs weren't charity. They were about building self-sufficiency and demonstrating what a community, organized and empowered, could do for itself. This was the soul of the party, a constructive vision of liberation that went far beyond mere protest. Of course, This level of organizing and influence was seen as a major threat by the U.S. government. In 1968, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover publicly declared the Black Panther Party the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. The FBI initiated a secret and illegal program called COINTELPRO, or Counterintelligence Program, to disrupt, discredit, and destroy the Panthers. Their tactics were ruthless. They forged letters to create internal conflicts and sow paranoia. They planted informants inside the party to gather intelligence and provoke illegal activities. They worked with local police departments to orchestrate raids on Panther offices and homes, often with deadly results. One of the most infamous examples was the pre-dawn raid on December 4, 1969. Chicago police, working with the FBI, stormed the apartment of Fred Hampton, the charismatic 21-year-old chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party. Hampton was a brilliant organizer who had successfully built a rainbow coalition, uniting the Panthers with Puerto Rican and poor white activist groups. He was shot and killed in his bed. Another Panther, Mark Clark, was also killed. The official story was a shootout, but later evidence revealed the police fired nearly 100 shots, while the Panthers fired only one. Fred Hampton's assassination was a calculated move to decapitate the party's leadership and stamp out its growing influence. This was not an isolated incident. Clashes, raids, and arrests happened all over the country, leading to the deaths and imprisonment of many key Panther members. The combination of external pressure from the government and internal divisions took a heavy toll. Huey Newton's legal battles and growing paranoia, fueled by COINTELPRO, created a rift between him and other leaders like Eldridge Cleaver. The party split into factions, weakening its unity and effectiveness. By the mid-1970s, with many leaders dead, in prison, or in exile, the party's focus shifted almost entirely to mainstream community service and electoral politics in Oakland under the leadership of Elaine Brown. While these efforts were valuable, the revolutionary energy of the early years had dissipated. The membership dwindled, and by 1982, the Black Panther Party officially dissolved. So, what is the outcome? The legacy? It's complicated. On one hand, the party was dismantled. But on the other, its impact is undeniable and continues to resonate today. The Panthers fundamentally changed the conversation around black liberation, popularizing the phrase Black Power and inspiring a generation to embrace their history and identity with pride. Their survival program set a precedent for community-based organizing and mutual aid that continues in movements like Black Lives Matter. The free breakfast program was so successful and popular that it pressured the U.S. government to expand its own national school breakfast and lunch programs. Their focus on health activism, particularly sickle cell anemia, raised national awareness and led to increased funding and research. And their critique of police brutality and their call for community control of the police remains as relevant today as it was over 50 years ago. The Black Panther Party was not perfect. It had its share of internal conflicts, dogmatism, and flaws. But they were young, courageous revolutionaries who, in the face of incredible oppression, dared to build a new world in the shell of the old. They fed children, healed the sick, and stood up to power, leaving behind a legacy of service, resistance, and radical love for the people. Their story is a crucial chapter in American history, reminding us that true power often comes not from the top down, but from the ground up. Thank you so much for watching. The story of the Panthers is vast, and we've only scratched the surface. If you found this video insightful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what you think is the most important part of the Panthers' legacy. See you next time.